Hello, Mind Mappers, and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over As A Man Thinketh by James Allen. On the front cover of the book that I have, a person is limited only by the thoughts that he chooses. Really great quote from the book. This is a book that so many people have recommended to me. I have been hesitant to read it until now, but I'm really glad I did. It was a wonderful, wonderful book. A very short read, but concise and packed with big ideas. The introduction that I pulled out gives us a brief overview of kind of the main idea of the book and what we can expect to learn today. The greatest achievement was, at first, for a time, a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the bird waits in the egg, and in the highest version of the soul, a waking angel stirs. Dreams are the seedlings of reality. So you can see the whole book is just filled with quotes like that, this beautiful old language and this kind of really deep meaning in just a few sentences. So essentially what I think we're talking about here is that every great achievement, every success that you've ever seen happen in reality was at first just a dream. Everyone you look up to in the world got where they are because they dared to have that dream. People who are potentially business titans, sports stars, amazing parents, they all believe that they could succeed in the domain that they've chosen. And I think that's a big piece is whoever you look up to, a big reason why you look up to them is because they believed that they could and they went out and they actually achieved what they set out to do. Often, for some reason, we end up believing that those people were born good at things. If we see someone who is successful in business, we think maybe they got lucky or perhaps they, were born into the business or something like that. But the reality, of course, and we know this if we kind of look into it deeper at all, is that there's a great deal of hard work. Potentially, there's a little bit of luck or self created luck, and a lot of support involved in anyone's success. But in order to unlock all of those things, in order to unlock the ability to work hard, the ability to create your own luck, and to kind of bring people around you that are going to help contribute to your success, you need to believe that it's going to be possible. And that's really what he's talking about here, that the dream is the acorn. And what we're going to explore in depth today is essentially this entire concept. Together, we're going to look into ways to define, to crystallize, and get clear about your dream. And if you don't like the word dream, you could say vision, you could say goal, you could say objective. This is just the word that James is saying. We're also going to explore the different ways that James lays out that you can water the acorn, right? It's not just enough to have the dream, but you need to continually revisit that dream to make sure that it's getting the nutrients it needs to grow. We want to make sure that that dream grows all the way just from the acorn in the ground into that big oak tree, which is, of course, the kind of analogy for the great life that we want to create. Before we get into the next points, I wanted to talk a little bit about mind mapping. You can get the most out of these mind maps by following along. You can learn more in multimedia by visiting the extended blog post that I now have in the description of every single video. I've set up a blog so that you can go and you can see the text-based version of this as well. And you can get an in-depth breakdown of topics like mind mapping, habits, and learning with my 2-hour-long masterclasses, which are dozens and dozens of books, hundreds and hundreds of hours of studying, distilled into one 2-hour-long multimedia format course for you to take online at themindmapguy.com. I recommend that you go and grab the mind map and follow along with the video. And with that, we're going to jump into our very first idea here, which is cherish. Cherish your visions, cherish your ideals. Cherish the music that stirs in your heart, the beauty that forms in your mind, the loveliness that drapes your purest thoughts. For out of them will grow all delightful conditions, all heavenly environments. Of these, but remain true to them, your world will at last be built. So the idea here that I pulled out is what's our true vision? What's our true ideal? And on the face, it might seem like perhaps this is an easy question, one that you've thought of a bunch of times before. We've all probably set goals or plans for our life, but this, like most of James' writing in this book, is much deeper than it might seem on the surface. There are a lot of external factors that influence us on a daily basis. Things like our society, our family, our friends, they all want the best for us. Well, specifically our family and friends do, that's for sure. But often that means not following our true visions and our ideals because our true visions and ideals might be scary to them. It might be potentially ruinous to us to chase those ideals, or at least that's the version of the reality that they're seeing. These external factors can lead us to setting goals, making plans, or adopting something that might seem true to us, but in fact is a compromise based on what our family, friends, and society want from us. So we have to be very careful to dive deeply into what's my true vision for my future? What are my true ideals? What do I truly want? Trying to push away as much as we can the family, the friends, and society. Not that they don't want the best for us, but that their best for us might look a little bit different than what we truly want. And I really love this one quote from Robert Fritz in his really good book that I've done on the channel. I recommend that you go and check it out. The Path of Least Resistance, probably one of my best books of 2020, extremely underrated. Path of Least Resistance by Robert Fritz. He says that the human soul won't invest itself in compromise. And essentially, what he's doing here is just echoing what James says. Again, another great writer putting really deep topics into something that's just so concise. The human soul won't invest itself in compromise. We need to ruthlessly pick out what our true visions and ideals are and make sure that we're echoing those in our external environments. So, how might we do that? We'll get to some of those practical steps in just a minute here, but I think what we need to think about is that we don't want to compromise. And if we're setting up compromise by listening to the fears and the anxieties of people around us when we're trying to think of what we truly want from this life, if we're setting a goal that we want to build a big business, that we want to perhaps become an artist, and all these sorts of different things, people naturally have fears because there's a potential failure component there. We need to be very sure that we're listening to our true selves and not other people's anxieties. So cherish your visions and cherish your ideals. Our next idea here is about mining, and only by searching and mining are gold and diamonds obtained. A man can find every truth connected to his being if he will dig deep into the mine of his soul. Again, just another great quote. Love the mining analogy so much. I really like this idea that we need to kind of dig deep and get connected with our ideal, our vision. And really, what we're trying to do here is, like we already spoke about, talk about true visions, talk about ideals. They're sometimes covered by those external environmental factors. Mining is the process that we're going to go through and that we all need to go through to dig deeper into our mind, into our soul, and get progressively closer to our true vision. What do you want from this one experience that we have that we all call life? We only get this one chance. And I know that's a cliche thing to say, but oftentimes cliches are cliches because they're so true. So, what does mining your mind truly look like? Well, for me, it comes up with meditation. And for me, meditation, we've spoken about it quite a lot on the channel. It's maybe not traditional, but essentially what I do is I call quiet time. And quiet time can be a mix of different things. If you're just getting into it, I really recommend you try my kind of shortcut to quiet time, which is if you have a warm beverage first thing in the morning, that's a great habit stack that you can stack new habits onto. So while you're brewing your coffee or your warm drink in the morning, make sure that you're just not taking in any inputs. Don't be looking at social media. Don't be listening to a podcast. Don't be watching this video. And instead, you should be taking your time to watch your thoughts. And maybe you sit down on the couch and you watch your thoughts just for 5-10 minutes. That's a really great place to get started with quiet time. And I think to really mine your idea of the true version of the future, it's a good idea to essentially use thought-provoking questions. And here's a quick list that I've stolen from other books for you. Things like, what would you do if you knew that you couldn't possibly fail? What did you most want to do when you were 13 to 16 years old, before all these ideas from society and all these fears of failures came to you? If you only had 6 months to live, what would you do? Pretend that you won the lottery. What would you do? And when you look into your ikigai, what do you see? And there's a really good book on a Japanese concept of ikigai where it brings essentially four concentric circles of essentially what does the world need? What can you be paid for? What are you good at? And what do you truly love? And those kind of converge into your ikigai. I really recommend that you go and check out the book review that I've done on ikigai if you haven't seen it already. That's a good place to get started, is to have a visualization of really kind of what your true soul wants and how you can kind of combine it and bring it forth in your own life. Our next idea here is one of the best two ideas that I pulled out of the book, and I called it spring. The will to do springs from the knowledge that we can do. Now, we're connected to our ideal. We've understood that connecting to the ideal is like kind of essentially understanding that we are currently an acorn and we have the capability to grow into this big oak tree, but we need to make sure that we're cherish and mining and make sure that we're just kind of feeding and watering, continually feeding and watering that acorn. And we're connected to that ideal. Step number one in accomplishing that ideal, of course, we've already talked about it, it's belief. And Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Belief is so important that without it, you literally won't even be able to get started. And a book that I really recommend you go and check out, if you're looking for more of a scientific take on this, I recommend that you go and check out Mindset by Carol Dweck, one of the true great books that we've ever done on the channel. Next, we should talk a little bit about belief and how we can cultivate it in our own lives. One great exercise I picked up from Brian Tracy is this idea of mirroring, or the Stoics might have called it like finding an ideal sage, someone who has been where you are and kind of is now able to be where you want to be. So the whole idea here, breaking it down into real practical steps for you, is can we find someone that has done what you're looking to do? So it might not necessarily be someone that's on the exact same path as you, but someone that's successful in a particular domain that you really look up to is a great place to start. The real ideal here is to find someone who's had potentially even a tougher road to success than you. These negative thoughts and negative beliefs can creep in that says, oh, that person had it easy. Oh, I've got this trouble that that person doesn't have. So it's a really good exercise to go and find, what were the struggles of some of the people that I look up to? Did they start in a similar place to me? Did they have more hardships along the way? And that helps you kind of bolster and build up your belief. So if you can find someone like that, and you can find someone like this in almost any domain, you want to learn from that person. What did their path look like, right? You can get an idea, kind of a map of the territory, so to speak, to see what kind of steps they went along the way. Things like what kept them going through their hardships, what really was kind of their driving core force as to why they went after the goal that you're trying to achieve. And can you see a little version of yourself in them is another good thing to think about, is can you put yourself in their shoes and see how you could also accomplish what they have been able to accomplish? And the whole idea here from Brian Tracy, of course, and I've done a lot of book reviews on Brian Tracy. Again, go and check those ones out too. But if someone else has done it, so can you. And that's a really powerful belief bolstering activity that you can do. Our next idea here, I called it 80%. And he says that 80% of success is literally just showing up. After mining and springing and kind of bolstering that little acorn that we've got right from the very start of the book, let's start actualizing. Let's get that acorn growing. Let's put some real kind of work into this actualization process that we're trying to go through. So, what's the biggest contributor to success, according to James Allen? He says that, like many other great writers do, it's really just the process of showing up. Stephen Pressfield talks so much about this in his books, the War of Art, sorry, and a really great analogy towards this is essentially just showing up and writing 500 words every single day. If you're a writer, write 500 words. It's not about those 500 words being the best you've ever written, but it's just about the showing up. Getting started and then consistently putting in the work to lead towards success is really, really difficult, but that's the main piece is just getting started and staying consistent. You don't have to have any real kind of you don't have to have any real special talents or anything like that. If you've got kind of the ability to get started and start showing up, that's 80% of the way there. So, how do you get started? The best thing I think that you can do to get started is to experiment. And I actually didn't know that this was a big core kind of principle of mine until I was talking to some of my friends just a couple of weeks ago. And they said that what they really admired in me was the fact that I'm willing to just get started. I've got an idea and I'll put out some kind of a minimum viable product. I'll put an email out there to the email list. I'll post on Facebook or something like that and just get started and see if it gets any traction. And if it does, then I can get consistent. But being able to just get started and rather than have an idea, actually get going, that's that's a big superpower in my opinion. So step number one, getting real practical here. Step number one is, what is your dream? The one thing that you feel called to realize. And we've already talked about that. Step number two is, what's one small experiment that you can run a test on, the very, very first step. So if you're in business, I really like the idea of getting someone to pay you $1 for something. If you've got a business idea, see if you can convince someone to pay $1 for it. If you've got kind of an exercise kind of ideal that you want to uphold and you're currently not exercising as much as you would potentially like to, can you exercise just for one day? That's a really good spot. How do you feel when you're exercising? That sort of a thing. Run that experiment. You have absolutely nothing to lose by running an experiment. If you don't succeed in the experiment, if you can't get yourself to exercise or you can't get someone to pay you $1, it's totally okay. It was an experiment and you can go back, reassess, and run the next one. You want to create a headline or a subheadline. These are all ideas here. Create a headline, subheadline for a book that you want to write. Interview someone who you truly admire. How did they first get started? These little things will help you get started, run that experiment, and then you can start to get consistent. And how do we do that? Well, for me, daily rituals is a huge part of consistency. Three things that I recommend that you look into is, number one, a daily habit tracker. What 1 to 5 things that you can measure will let you know that you're on the right path. For example, if you're trying to, start a business, you might measure your percentage of time that you were on track with the business versus off track. If you're trying to get healthier, you might measure how many steps you had or the calories that you took in, or potentially did you do a workout that day or not. A daily habit tracker or a daily kind of tracker of your main goals is so, so helpful. If you don't already have one, I really recommend that you set one of those up. Or you could also try a morning ritual. What does your ideal start like, right? So I think there's two main spots in your day that changing the habits there is not only the easiest, but also provides you the highest amount of reward. And a morning ritual would be that. You can easily change pieces in your morning ritual, much more so than you can change your afternoon habits. So I really, really like changing some things in your morning ritual so that they look a little bit more like your dream or like your ideal that you're trying to uphold. One potential piece here might be literally like, let's connect to our dream, right? Let's write for 3 to 5 minutes on, what is my dream? What does it look like? And kind of visualization of the dream. Next, you could also change your night ritual. This is the second piece. I think probably the second most easily changed time in your day, habit wise, is the nighttime ritual. And the day starts the night before. So if you have a really great consistent nighttime ritual and then you're setting yourself up for success every single day, it's so helpful. I really recommend you look into setting up a nighttime ritual. The time that you go to bed, the things you do before you go to bed are really, really helpful in setting you up for a good day going forward. Now, our next idea here is the final idea that I pulled from the book. We've talked a lot about kind of the acorn. We've talked about how to get closer to the ideal or the dream that you have for your future. We've talked a lot about springing and kind of making it so that you're constantly remembering and kind of crystallizing that idea. We've talked about 80% of success is literally just showing up and how to get started with that. Our final piece here is about the soul, and the soul attracts that which it secretly harbors, that which it loves, and that which it fears. it reaches the height of its cherished aspirations. It falls to the level of unchastised desire, and circumstances are the means by which the soul receives its own. So, the whole idea here, the final piece that I wanted to talk about, is what are our souls focused on? That's going to be what's attracted into our lives. If you're tuned into negativity on social media all day long, well, guess what? That's going to be your life. You're going to spend your hopefully 80 years on this planet, and who knows what's going to be going on after this. And you're going to spend that worrying about what people say on social media. And that's a good way to think about it is you need to be very careful what you're paying attention to and what you're secretly harboring, as James Allen says. So, what should we tune into? Well, the idea here is let's tune into our ideals, and part of that morning ritual is boom, what are my ideals? How can I think of what I truly want to be at my best? Can we look for love? Can we look for abundance, beauty, and gratitude in the world, perhaps by journaling? And these are going to water you, the acorn, and turn your life into a big oak tree. I really am thankful that you've been with me here today. This is As A Man Thinketh by James Allen. And once again, a little bit more about mind mapping. If you want to get the mind maps and follow along, you can get those at my website, themindmapguy.com. I've also got extended blog posts of all the different videos that I've done on that website, as well as my masterclasses, which are hundreds and hundreds of hours of learning, all distilled down into a 2 hour long masterclass on particular topics so that you can learn more in the least amount of time possible.